Learn basics of regex in JavaScript. At first imagine that you are solving a code challenge and this is the function that you need to implement. The function name is validate input contains digits that expects one parameter username. So you need to check that the parameter username contains any digits. Type of this parameter is a string and the function itself should return true or false. For example, if I call this console log, it should return false, true and true. And this is because the first parameter dragon doesn't contain any digits. The second parameter dragon 123 contains this digit part 123, and the same with the player, it contains 99. So if you think how to solve it without knowing of regex, you will find that this challenge is not so simple. So at first you will need to convert this string into an array, and then you need to iterate through each character inside of this array in order to find does it contain any numbers or not. But with regex we can solve this challenge in just 3 lines. So regex is a string scanner, so it can go through an entire string and then find some specific patterns that are inside of this string. Then for solving this challenge with regex we need to learn the basics of regex. And for learning regular expressions we have this handy website like Regex 101. So if you will follow to this website, the initial view will very similar to this one. So here we have an input for regex pattern. Here we have our input for text string, and then on the right hand side we have different tabs. So at first I would collapse the explanation tab and the quick reference tab. So now I see only match information tab, and this is basically the console log. Then you will also be able to find some default flags. So right after the slash you will find some flags. So let's click it and then let's deselect them. And now we have an empty page and we are ready to learn about regular expressions. Now I added the example strings. So on that first, let's solve the simplest challenge for regex. Let's find that inside of this text string, we have the word dragon. And all what I need for that is to just write this word inside of this input, and then the regex will scan our text string to find this word. And if we see any matches, you will find them in the match information tab. So now we have one match because we have one word dragon in our string. So now let's find the player. And now you can see that we selected the player, but we don't select these 2 digits after the player. And also, if I write player in lowercase, you will find that we don't have any matches, and this is because by default, the regular expression is case sensitive. So it means that lowercase letters and uppercase letters are different. If we want to make our regular expression case insensitive, for that we need to add a new flag. So for adding flags, we need to find this slash, and then let's click it. And here you will see all flags that regex has. So we need to find the insensitive flag that makes our match case insensitive. If I click here, you'll find that right after the slash, we see a new letter I. So flags are basic settings that we can configure for our pattern. And now you also see that with this flag, we found the player with a capital P letter. Then let's again write the dragon. And now you can see that we have only one match, even though that we have the word dragon 2 times inside of our string. And this is because by default, if the regular expression pattern finds the first match, it stops the search. So if we want to find multiple matches inside of our string, for that we have another flag, which is global. And here you see the description that don't return after first match. So if I add this flag, you will see that our pattern finds 2 matches. So here one important thing that the order of flags is not important. So now you see letters I, G, but also if I reorder them, so now we see G, I, the result will be the same. But let's return back to our challenge. We want to find if this string contains any digits. So for example, if we want to find that this text contains the digit 1, we can just write 1, and then we can see in the match information, do we have any matches or not? And the same with all other numbers. But here is the problem. We accept any number inside of the string. So it means that all these numbers are acceptable for our challenge, but we can't write them in this way because it would mean that we are searching for literally this string. So if I copy it, and paste somewhere in our test string, you'll find that now our pattern matches. But this is not the behavior that we want. We just want to find 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 and so on. In this case, we can enclose our characters into square brackets. And now you will see 5 different matches in the match information tab, because now we converted all our digits to a character class. So basically it means that we want to select one of these characters. Also, you see that all these numbers are in the incremental order, and for this case we have a shorthand, so I can just write 0-9. And if you hover over these numbers, you'll find that this is a range. So now we accept any number that is in this range from 0 to 9. Now you see that we have 5 different matches, but basically it should be enough to solve our challenge. I return back to VS Code, and also on the left side we see the console. So if I save the current file, you will see 3 times word undefined in the console. And this is because our function doesn't return anything. So at first, let's write a regex pattern that we wrote on this website. So at first I create a new variable regex pattern, and then I write 2 slashes. So the same slashes that we use for writing comments. But now I can write our pattern inside of these slashes. And then if you hover over the regex pattern, you will see that the type of this pattern is a regular expression. If you write regex pattern dot, you will see the list of all properties and functions that the regex has. So one of the functions is called test. So we will use this function, and if you look to the description of this function, you will see that this function expects one input parameter string and it returns a boolean, so true or false. So and basically it works in the way that if the match was found, it returns true, and otherwise it returns false. So now here we can pass the username, and then let's store the result into a separate variable. And now let's return the result. And if I save this file, you will see in the console false, true, true. So if the input is just a dragon without any numbers, it returns false, and otherwise if our input contains any digits, it returns true. And the result in the console matches with the result that we have expected. It means that our function works correctly. Now let's continue with the next challenge. So now you will need to implement the function extract all stats that expects one parameter stats. The type of this parameter is a string, and this function should return an array of numbers. So for example, we pass these 3 different inputs. So in the first input you see HP is 100 and XP is 250, and then in the result we see an array with 2 numbers, 100 and 250. And also you can see that these numbers are enclosed into quotes, which means that the type of these numbers is a string. Then for the second input, damage 20, we have an array with just one number 20. And then for a random string that doesn't contain any digits, we just return an empty array. I return back to this website, and here I updated our test string, so now it contains all these inputs. And you see that our current pattern detects all these numbers individually. So for example, instead of the number 100, we see 3 different matches, 1, 0, 0. And this is because this character class matches a single character from this set. In order to specify the length of our pattern, we can add the curly braces. And now inside of the curly braces, we can write the length. So for example, 1, in this case, we have absolutely the same result. But if I will write 2, you will see that now we have matches 10, 25 and 20. So it means that we select numbers with the length of 2. And if I type 3, now you see only 2 matches, 100 and 250, because we select only numbers that consist of 3 digits. But in this way, I configure only the static length of our pattern. But what if I want a range? So for example, we want a range from 1 to 3. In this case, the first number will be 1, and then I need to write comma, and then I specify the end of the length. And now if you hover over, you will see that this is a quantifier that matches between 1 and 3. So it means that all numbers that contain a length from 1 to 3 will be selected. But if we don't want to add these limitations, so basically we want to select from 1 until the end, we can remove the second number, but we can keep the comma, and in this case you will see that the range will be from 1 until the unlimited. So now it should be enough for solving the code challenge, and on this time I will just copy this pattern by clicking this button. Then I go back to the Visual Studio Code. Here in the console we see 3 times undefined. So now let's implement our function. So at first let's create the variable regex pattern. Then for finding all values that match this pattern, we need to call a different function. So for that, I will write the stats.match. And here you can see that this is a function that is attached to the string. So stats is a string. And then this function expects one parameter, which is a string or a regular expression. So we will pass our regular expression pattern. And now let's store the results into a separate variable. And then let's return the results. If I save this function, we will see a very close but not the same outcome that we expect. So let's check each input individually. So for the input with HP 100 and XP 250, we have the right outcome. Then the same for the input with a damage, it can successfully find this number 20. But then for a random string, it returns a null. But we want to return an array instead of null if we don't have any matches. So it means that we need to write an additional if statement. So basically, if the result is equal to null, in this case, I want to return an empty array. And then because here I call the keyword return, I don't even need to write the else statement for the main result. And now if we save this file, you will see that for a random string, we see an empty array. And if I check all these inputs, you will see that we have the right results. So it means that our function works correctly. So today you learned the basics about regex and also in what kind of situations we can use it. In the next episode, we will look to more complex examples and also we'll talk about capture groups and shorthands in regex.